Welcome to the Boomer Briefing Podcast, where we help you solve a critical business issue in 20 minutes or less. I'm your host, John Hubbard, Chief Growth Officer here at BoomerConsulting, and with me today is Sandra. Sandra is our president, as well as one of our leading thought leaders in the area of talent. So for our conversation today, Sandra, we're going to be talking about kind of the 5 talent trends for 2023. Now, we talked about these at the beginning of this year. So for those that have been listening to the podcast for a while, you may remember listening to the episode earlier this year on the 5 talent trends, but we wanted to kind of give an update, a bit of a closure on these trends by the time you're listening to this episode, and just kind of revisit and talk about maybe what has changed this year, or maybe how these trends have evolved throughout the year. So Sandra, would you mind starting just kind of doing a brief recap of the 5 trends?
Don't mind at all, and I agree with you. So it's interesting when you look at the 5 trends that some of them you will hear and you'll go, that's exactly what we're working on right now. And others you'll go, oh, we've kind of gone past that. But we'll try to recap each one of them. And our first one was non-traditional talent opportunities. And those came in a bunch of different ways. So one of them was we can go outside of the traditional CPA to get people to hire. And so we're finding people that are project managers, process managers, marketing professionals, and the list goes on and on and on, that we're actually able to kind of fill in for some of those non-traditional talent opportunities that help us win the talent war, which is what everybody's still talking about. And then also outsourcing. That has become, at the beginning of this year, I felt like it was still a kind of a new thing. Now it's like you talk to any firm out there and they've either thought about it or they're doing it, one of the two. So it's not necessarily a new one anymore, but that's also helping us with non-traditional talent. Number 2 was creating employee well-being. And that, I believe, came right off of COVID, the COVID years, the dark years of 20 and 21. I think they came off of that. And we got so much more tuned into taking care of our employees, not just their physical health, but their mental health. And we know that our benefits have gotten better. We know that things that we're doing within the firm, opportunities and strategies we're having inside the firm are all taking care of our employees more. We are also seeing that become a part of our retention within our firm. So I think all of that really has helped. And John, I'm going really fast here, but have I missed anything on either talent opportunities or on employee well-being that you want to add to?
Well, I don't think you missed anything, but I'll go back to the non-traditional talent opportunities. It's really interesting to think about maybe at the beginning of this year, what was categorized as non-traditional is quickly becoming traditional.
Good point.
Right?
Good point.
And I think part of that has to do with how firms are really strategizing around how work gets done is kind of evolving and ultimately influencing the talent they think they need in order to do that, right? So I think long are the days where we're expecting, let's say for example, one partner to not only sell the work and manage the work, but also do the work, right? We're starting to figure out that, hey, we can hire the right people. They don't have to be CPAs, right? In order to get that work done. And maybe they can manage it better, or maybe they can sell it better than we can.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that's really interesting. And this whole conversation around the second trend of that employee well-being, I think we thought we knew what it was at the beginning of this year, and still to this day, firms are trying to come up with new ways to prioritize the well-being of employees. And I think one way we're seeing that is if your firm's strategy does not enhance the well-being for your employees, it's probably not a strategy that's going to get a lot of buy-in. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And when people come and interview with you, no matter who the position is for, don't be surprised if they're not asking you questions about how are you taking care of your employees? How are you caring for them, their well-being? And if you have really not put any effort into that, don't be surprised if those people that are sitting there in front of you look for an opportunity somewhere else. So we would like to think that that is one that is going to give you a great deal of opportunity. So, all right, number 3, the integration of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging into your culture. Not making it just a strategy or a committee that you put together, actually having it as a strategy to help you with your acquisition and your retention of employees and making your firm culture better. I love the fact that the more diverse we get in the people that we hire, the more different people are in where they've lived, in the way they were brought up, in their education, everything about them. The more diverse you can get, the better your team gets, and the better you can transform your firm. And so that's what we talk about all the time. What do you think, John? Diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Are we seeing some strides there in our firms?
I think so, and I think, well, at least from my experience, the number one question I'm getting from firms on this is that B piece. What does B mean, right?
Yeah.
When you say DEI, people get it. Then you throw in the B, and they say, well, what is that? Well, that is belonging, right? You can have the diversity. You can have the versions of equity out there. You can have inclusion, but if those individuals don't feel like they belong in the firm, that's a problem.
It's a big
right?
problem.
So
yeah.
Not only how do you build a culture around that, but one where people can actually look left and right to someone that doesn't look like them or maybe has a different skill set than them and say, I actually belong here.
Yep.
And I feel it.
Yeah. And I really, I love that one. And if you're sitting there asking yourself, I also get asked the question, how do you know whether people feel like they belong or not? Ask them, right? Just ask them. Have people that sit down and have a one-on-one conversation with people in your firm. Do you feel like you belong here? Do you feel like you have friends here? Do you feel like this is somewhere where you could make a living and make your career? And get them to tell you their truth and then listen to them and make some changes. So, all right, number 4, confront the success skills gap. We have seen this huge uptake over the last couple of years in learning and development. And one of the things that we have seen them have to work on is success skills. So many of you might think about that as core skills, or they're the things that maybe are not taught in your core curriculum when you're in college. So things like delegation and communication and having hard conversations and building trust and all of those kind of things. What happened, again, during the dark years of 20 and 21, some of those skills kind of got lost. We were all behind our cameras. We all were able to work from home, which was all wonderful, and we love that. However, some of the things that we want people to do in our firms, having conversations with clients, having conversations with each other, face-to-face conversations, having to speak in public, those kind of skills have gotten kind of lax over those last few years. We're having to pump them back up again. So a lot of our learning and development professionals are really putting some effort into really confronting that gap and putting some effort there. So don't be surprised if your firm is not doing that. John, what do you think? Are we seeing that in the firms that we're working with?
Yes, and you mentioned the learning and development role, which is one we're definitely seeing be integral to the success of most firms out there. I'm working with a firm, well actually many firms that are asking me, what are other firms our size doing in the L&D space? And everyone that's asking that, they need an L&D leader. So if your firm has been toying with that, kind of thinking about that, that might be something to consider. Also, these kind of core success skills are not just relegated to a certain level within the firm. This is true at all levels of an organization, especially when you kind of think about the fact that how your firm is probably going to grow over the next 5, 10, 15 years may not be how it grew the last 5, 10, 15 years. Would you agree?
Agreed completely. I'll tell one really quick story. But I had a partner one time say to me after he heard me talk about confronting the success skills gap, and I made a similar comment. It's not just for your brand new people. It's not just for your managers. It's everybody. And he said, well, it's not for partners, is it? And I said, I don't know. How good are you at delegation? And I listed off about 5 or 6 different things. He goes, well, not that good. And I said, well, then I guess it's for you too. So I would just ask you, if you were sitting down and asking yourself, am I amazing at that? If you don't say yes, then maybe you need some help there too. And there's nothing wrong with that. We all could use some of that. All right, number 5, charting the course for digitalization of HR. How do we go after looking at things like the statistics, the KPIs that human resources professionals look at every day. And how do we get those in front of the partners and the decision makers in the firm and let them know that HR is a major part of running a CPA firm well. And that is where digitization happens. The dashboards that we look at, what we should be looking at every day, should have some things on there from the HR department. It could be retention rates. It could be how long it took to hire someone. It could be, there's a million different things, right? Are we within budget? When we look at, when you look at your budget, talent is still one of the top 1 or 2 expenses in the firm. Are you looking at that? And is it being driven, the data being driven by your HR department? So I think that is a super important one that I think has really risen to the top over the last couple of years.
I think so. And it's like turning HR from what sometimes could be categorized as just feelings staff may have to actual facts that staff may have, right? And the more firms can quantify any of their learnings, any of their feedback from employees, any sort of future direction that the firm wants to go, I think we're seeing some adoption happening more quickly when HR departments can quantify that information, make it a bit more tangible.
Absolutely.
So Sandra, that was really great kind of summary of the 5 trends. We talked about what they were, but also how they're evolving and how they're still relevant in addition to those 5 trends. And maybe it's even doubling down on one of these trends. Maybe it's throwing in, a new one. But as we look to 2024, what should firms be thinking about as it pertains to talent?
I think that I would keep all of the ones that are there. I don't know that there's any that I would completely get rid of, but I also would throw in, and we've had it on there in the past, but the actual engagement of employees, really finding a way to go out and look at your team members and engage them and pull them in and have them be a part of the decision making and the collaboration and really making their experience as they go through the firm, right? We talk about the client experience a lot, and I think that's one that a lot of people get used to, but the employee experience is the same thing. From the day that we start bringing them to the table, right, maybe hiring them, to the day that they decide to leave, how do we make them feel? There's that word. It's the 4-letter word, feel. How do we make them feel throughout that entire journey? And are we making them feel like they belong and a part of our culture? I think that is still going to be one that just is so important for every firm out there. So I would add that one as maybe one that we don't have specifically called out, but all of these play into it.
Right, and I love the word engagement you use. And I think sometimes firm leaders can let the impact each of their team members have on the firm be implied versus actually communicated. So one question I think we would really recommend you ask everyone in your firm is, how does your role contribute to the success of the firm?
Yep.
Right? And that may sound like a big question. Well, one, it is. And we may assume that they know the answer to that, but I think if you ask 5 people in your firm of varying levels across varying departments, you may get a few people that say, I need to think about that, right? And that is an opportunity to increase engagement.
Yeah.
So.
The other thing I was thinking about, John, when we were talking about, what could possibly change and what trends do we see going into 24, I was sitting there thinking to myself, I've had so many firm leaders say to me, Sandra, we ask them what they want. We can't possibly give them everything they want. And honestly, Sandra, come on. How much can we give them? We're giving them more time off. We're giving them be able to work from home. And it's almost, they get a little cynical, right? I have felt it too. So I can't even say they. I have felt it too. I think we have to start getting people plugged into exactly what you were just saying. How does your job impact the whole firm, and how does that then impact your career? It kind of is a full circle, right? And the more that we can teach and train about the firm and how to be a leader, no matter what your title is. Leadership is not about a title. It's about how you act in your job. I think the more we'll win. And I think that that's about teaching business skills too. And I think human resources and talent, that's a big part of that too. So that's the only other thing I would add, I think.
I agree. Yeah. And we certainly know we could talk about this topic for another hour. We won't do that to you. But I think that was a really good summary of the 5 major trends in talent that we're seeing, how they're evolving, some updates, around them. And I'm actually not surprised that you wouldn't take any of these 5 off the list, right?
I think so.
These weren't really short-term, kind of turn and burn trends. These were longer-term trends, which is why we ended up talking about them. But we do want to say thank you for listening. So this is rounding out this episode of our podcast. If you enjoyed the conversation, we would really recommend you subscribe. If you subscribe, we release new episodes, I think, every Tuesday morning, and we'd like to rotate the topics. This week, it's about talent, but we go through growth, process, technology, and leadership as well. But the common theme among all of those trends is they are relevant to the success of your firm. So thanks for listening, and please subscribe.